Hi, my name's Tess McKean and I am a 35-year-old chief executive and mother. When I was 34, I started trying for a baby with my husband, and very quickly I fell pregnant a couple of months after trying. Sadly, in that instance, at around 7.5, 8 weeks pregnant, so very early on, I found out that the pregnancy was not viable and that I was having my first miscarriage. I was really hurt and sad and surprised. Obviously, I knew that miscarriages were fairly common, but you never think it's going to happen to you. Anyway, I was very lucky. I had some very supportive friends and family, and I saw a coach, and in a fairly short amount of time I felt accepting, and I managed to start moving on with my life and decided to give myself a bit longer before I started to try again. A couple of months later, in May of 2018, I had what's called a chemical pregnancy, which is where you have a positive pregnancy test because you have a very early pregnancy, but it doesn't implant correctly, and within a couple of days you're not pregnant anymore. Obviously that's very challenging because you have a positive pregnancy test and you get all those feelings of hope again, and when that doesn't work out, it can be very disappointing. And chemical pregnancies are something that I'd never heard of before and that I don't think is talked about very frequently. So it compounded the sadness I'd had from the first miscarriage, and it started to make me get quite worried about my ability to carry a pregnancy to term. Fast forward a couple of months, and in September of 2018, I fell pregnant for the third time. I, at this point, had lots of medical support. I'd seen a doctor about recurrent miscarriages. They had decided that the best thing for me to do was inject myself with anticoagulants because they felt that I had some blood clotting conditions that might be impacting pregnancy. I took lots of different medications, progesterone, all the usual vitamins. I tried to eat really healthily, but I'm a very busy person at work, and I kept myself very busy. I did lots of international travel that year. I was so excited because I also found out that one of my best friends had fallen pregnant at a similar time and that we were due around the same sort of time. So there was a lot of happiness, and I got to the 12-week scan and everything was looking great. We found out that the chances of any kind of genetic problems were very low. We got to see the little heartbeat, the little thing wriggling around. We started to get really attached. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, while my husband was on a business trip, I went to have a scan that would tell me how the baby was doing, as well as what the sex was. And it was at that scan that the doctor told me that the baby no longer had a heartbeat and that the pregnancy had ended. This is called a missed miscarriage, and it can be incredibly shocking, incredibly hard to deal with, especially when you get past the 12-week phase and you think that everything's going quite well. You have no sign that anything's gone wrong. So for lots of women, the first point that they realise anything's happened is when they go for a scan. The reason I'm sharing all of this is because I think it's very, very easy for women to feel very alone. Even if you have a really supportive partner, even if you have really supportive friends and family, it's almost impossible not to in some way blame yourself. You look back and you think, what was I doing when it went wrong? What could I have done differently? How could I have changed my behaviour to have a different outcome? And the really sad truth of it is that in most cases there's almost nothing you could have done differently. I was seeing doctors, I had medication to treat conditions that I'd been diagnosed with. I was very busy at work, but I assumed that that was fine and that was fairly normal, and there must be lots of pregnant women who are very busy at work. So it was a really, really tough thing to come to terms with, and because the pregnancy was fairly far along, 16 weeks, my only option to conclude the pregnancy was to go and have an operation. So on the 14th of December 2018, I found myself in hospital, dreading the moment that I would have to go under general anaesthetic, because it's really scary for me. But when I woke up, it was done, and I was no longer pregnant, and it was time for me to pick up the pieces and move on with my life, and that can be incredibly challenging. My advice to women going through similar situations is talk about it with whoever you feel comfortable sharing with. I spoke to some of my best friends, I spoke to a counsellor, I spoke to different counsellors, 2 or 3 different counsellors who all had different methods, and I found each of them helpful in different ways. I decided to take a nice long break and not try to get pregnant for a bit longer. I began to worry whether I'd ever be able to carry a successful pregnancy. And I decided just to go out and have some fun and shake it off and do some trips and maybe take a holiday. Anyway, in May of 2019, I found out I was pregnant again for the 4th time. It was a really challenging thing to get excited about because I really didn't think it was going to work. And we don't talk enough about pregnancy after loss, because a normal pregnancy can be scary at the best of times, but when you've had a miscarriage, 2 miscarriages, 3, 4, 5, 6 miscarriages, it's a very difficult thing to enjoy. Everyone else is very happy for you and excited, and people that don't know what you've been through are coming up to you and saying, oh my goodness, you must be so excited to meet your baby, when are you due? And for mothers who are pregnant after a loss, it's very hard sometimes to be optimistic and to share in that joy. You have a whole 9 months to get through with every day just feeling scared and worried and nervous. And I think for me, the best advice I got was from my coach, who said, look, your body is capable of doing this. You need to trust in the process. You need to trust yourself. Rest as much as you possibly can. So I did. I was very, very lucky to have a supportive company, and they let me cut down my hours at work so I could really actively rest and look after myself. And then amazingly, on the 14th of December 2019, exactly a year to the day after I'd had the operation to resolve my previous miscarriage, my little boy was delivered by cesarean section. He was breech, he didn't want to turn the right way up, and because of all the medication I was on, he was considered a very high risk pregnancy. But lo and behold, he was safely delivered to us just before Christmas, and it's now nearly a year later. My little boy is turning 1 in 2 weeks' time, and it was an incredibly challenging journey. It was isolating, it was terrifying, it was heartbreaking, but equally it was joyful. It taught me how to be optimistic again. It taught me how to trust myself and trust my body. It taught me the value of rest. That was a big lesson for me. And it's just taught me so much about love for myself, forgiveness for myself, forgiveness for feeling that I had done anything wrong. I'm not a religious person at all, but I definitely felt connected to other women in a way that I hadn't before, in a more spiritual way. And I think, I hope that this story can just help other women perhaps feel less alone if they're going through anything similar. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and whether you become a biological parent or an adoptive parent, or if you decide that you don't think that becoming a parent is the journey that you're going to go on, I just want to send you strength and sisterhood and love. And for those of you who do end up becoming a parent, I want to say that even after loss, you are allowed to find parenthood hard. You're allowed to feel frustrated. You are allowed to feel exhausted. You are allowed to feel desperately fed up when your much longed for and beloved child is screaming in the middle of the night. You're allowed to feel like you want a break from being a mother or a parent. Just because you've finally got that child after a lot of loss, it doesn't mean that you need to enjoy every second of it. So this is my story. I hope that it's helpful to have shared, and I hope that this speaks to your heart and brings some joy and some sisterhood. Thank you.